the reasoning behind it, and what kind of response have you guys gotten since, those months since you guys have sent that out?
You know, the reason behind it was simply as a reminder. There was, at that time that letter came out, there was no real specific incident that was at the forefront that prompted it or initiated it. It is a general awareness on a daily basis in here that when you are, as a athletics association, putting on probably 120,000 interscholastic competitions each school year, over the course of that year and over the course of that many contests, sooner or later someone acts out of line and acts inappropriately, and it gets brought to our attention. So there wasn't a singular incident at the time it went out. Since it's gone out, there have been a few things that have occurred, including, a football coach wanting to officiate basketball, and some parents who thought they should be wrestling and not their kids. But at the time, it was sent as a heads up and a reminder. Don't ever forget that these events are rooted in a school and rooted in educational experiences, positive educational experiences for kids.
And the response from it, from athletic directors, parents, coaches?
In all honesty, and here we are, however many months since that point in time, and still talking about it. It was one of those items that came out of our office that was generally well received, positively received. I think with only 2 exceptions, all of the feedback that I received from that Cool It piece were very positive. From schools, from parents and fans, and from officials saying, yeah, that's right. We needed this reminder about now. So, and as I said, here we are months after that, still talking about it. So it was well received and evidently at the right time.
During your time, have you noticed kind of a culture change with regards to how parents and athletes and coaches kind of act towards their opponents and officials? Have things kind of been escalating to a point where you guys had to do something like this?
Well, certainly things have changed. From the time that you were competing, or even when I was competing, of course things have changed. We didn't know of high fives and chest bumps and those sorts of things back in those days. My head coach, said, you don't ever talk to the official. You keep your mouth shut. If there's anybody that needs to talk to the official, I will do that. That's my job. All you say is yes, sir, and no, sir. Those were the reminders that I got as a high school football player from Kenny Roloff, my head high school football coach. And it was advice that served me pretty well since that time. Things have changed, but I think as what is really important to identify in this and to put into the perspective, I mentioned a moment ago that in any given year there's in the neighborhood of 120,000 varsity events and tournament events. That's not counting our freshman and JV and sophomore games along the way. And out of 120,000 contests in a given year, you're probably needing to follow up on a handful of those where people have gotten so out of line or crossed that line that it warrants some follow-up attention. So we want to keep things in a perspective. Not every fan, not every set of parents, not every coach loses their poise in every ball game. But there are some incidents and some instances that, as I said, are worthy of a little bit of follow-up and a little nudge and say, hey, remember now, if this would not be appropriate in science class or in math class, it's not appropriate here tonight. Right. This is for education and a fun experience for kids.
Just talking about the kind of numbers across the states. I've seen it firsthand for hockey, not only at the youth level, but at the high school level as well. We're looking for as many people. We're kind of grabbing people from further areas to cover games around Green Bay, Appleton, those areas. So I guess with regards to the whole state, how desperate are we for newer officials to fill positions that are open for people not only retiring but just giving it a try 1 year and realizing it's not for them for multiple reasons?
You know, the number of officials that we license each year has been very strong and very healthy, in the neighborhood of 9,000 or more men and women licensed each year. But when you talk about an official shortage, there's a couple of points to acknowledge in that. You know, first off, a lot of the officials are aging. You know, we're seeing more gray-haired officials out there than perhaps, well, certainly 20 or 30 years ago. Thank goodness that many of them continue to give back to the game and give back to their communities, you know, for 20, 30, 40. We even have quite a number of officials who relicensed and are still active for 50 years. Our problem has not been so much being able to identify and recruit new officials. Because of the National Federation's efforts, our own efforts, we will send out staff to attend job fairs on college campuses and work fairs wherever, you know, across the state and around the state that we can find them, and we have a table, as you may know, at all of our state tournament events, where officials are sitting there to talk with and hand out license applications and officiating information and material to anybody who happens to walk by their booth and may have an interest. The recruitment of new officials hasn't been as big an obstacle for us as being able to retain them. And new officials, young officials are anxious for their opportunities to get beyond the youth level or the club sport level, or the freshman or JV level. They want to work their way up to varsity contests, build that schedule. They want to know that there will be an opportunity for them to work a regional or sectional tournament, or maybe someday a state championship down the line. And certainly if you look at the National Association of Sport Officials data from the nationwide survey that they did, you will find exactly why officials are leaving the vocation. They had a large sampling and terrific feedback on that. And certainly the berating, the negative, sometimes threatening behavior of coaches and fans is one of the leading causes for officials to hang up their whistles. But the other one, quite frankly, is a feeling of no opportunity here. Some of the things that we do is to constantly remind conference commissioners or schedulers, assigners, our athletics directors who are contracting with the officials that you can't just use the same officials all of the time. You know, look for opportunities in your schedule, perhaps with your non-conference games, to bring in some new people. You know, give them that crack, give them that foothold into the varsity level, give them some exposure and an opportunity to prove themselves and to learn. You know, maybe they're not quite fully ready for Big Ten play. But you need to provide an opportunity. Non-conference holiday tournaments, you know, get new people in there. Don't just schedule all of your freshman and JV games, you know, to the 2 faculty members who are in the hallways every day. And it's really convenient, if I'm the athletics director, to have you fill up my entire boys and girls JV schedule. it's easy for me, and what harm does it do? It's only a JV or a freshman game. Well, the impact it has is that it denies those other new and aspiring officials access to games and learning and growth opportunities. So as administrators, we need to be smart. When you talk about a shortage of officials here in Wisconsin, absolutely, depending on the sport and depending on the geography, it absolutely is true. Football, for example, we need football officials all across the state in order to accommodate all levels, freshman, JV, reserves, and varsity contests. We are seeing members that have to schedule games on Thursday nights in order to find, a crew available. Sometimes on Saturdays instead of that traditional Friday night. And as you go across the state, depending on, again, the geography, there may be a shortage in your area of volleyball officials. There may be a shortage in some parts of the state in soccer officials. If you simply look at the numbers that blanket the state, we're sitting pretty good. But certainly out of that 9,000, a hefty majority of those officials are basketball officials. Everybody likes to be a basketball official, evidently. But if you just simply look at the sheer numbers, we're holding okay. We need to hold on to those officials who are giving it a try and do a better job of keeping them with us. And certainly in some sports, or on any rain day, any makeup rain day for baseball and softball umpires, as many as we have, there's not enough baseball and softball umpires when everybody in the state's looking to make up a game due to 3 days of rain out. So we're sitting okay. I'm not aware of games. I'm not aware of a lot of games not being able to be played because of not having officials, but I am aware of having to do some creative scheduling. Change this game to Monday to Tuesday or Tuesday to Monday, or Thursday to Friday, whatever, in order to find available officials when everybody's looking.
Fantastic. We'll keep going down the line here. You kind of, hit on it already. Some of the reasons behind the shortage, obviously, abuse from coaches and spectators and things like that. Has anybody brought up travel or the salary for games? People just don't find, the time to be worth it, that sort of thing, to be away from the family on weeknights or weekends. Could that be some of the reason why people might give it a try but realize it's really not worth it?
Certainly, yes. There is time, there is travel. You're giving up a lot of Friday night fish fries if you're a football crew and working at a high level. And it requires, if you're married, it requires a special, spouse and relationship in order to understand and be supportive of that. But in all honesty, and absolutely, while there are some who say, the time isn't worth it, the money isn't enough, usually those have not been the singular and driving issue that I have heard. It might be the last straw or that final irritant. It usually is those other things, either after perhaps a very, very tough and close competition and people getting up in your face and that sense of feeling unappreciated or unrespected, and the frustration at not being able to advance, not being able to keep honing my skills at increasingly more challenging levels. The time, the travel, the compensation don't appear to me to be the primary reasons and drivers that officials do what they do. And it's not generally the first thing out of their mouth that we hear as reasons for hanging up the whistle. It's usually other things. These things might be the final straws that they think of mentioning to us.
You kind of mentioned, football. That you are looking for people is one of the sports. Obviously, you need the most people on a field for every game. Any other sports kind of concern? You mentioned there's a lot of basketball officials. How are the numbers for that sport specifically? Are you guys very happy where you're at right now with that sport? And what are the ones you're kind of hoping to recruit more people to kind of fill some open positions?
Well, you know, in all honesty, our track and field and cross-country officials, gymnastics officials, those are sports that really could use some help and some infusion of new officials. Out of our 9,300, almost 9,400 licensed officials today, there are about 2,300 of those that are baseball. Almost 4,700 of them are basketball officials. 260 cross-country starters. Football is 2,200, and gymnastics only 127 gymnastics officials right now. They don't usually have any trouble finding work. If you're a gymnastics official, you can find meets. Hockey is at 407 officials. Soccer is at 1,000. Softball almost 2,000. Swimming is 200. Track and field 470. Volleyball is 1,700, and wrestling is 524. So, you know, when we get around tournament time, finding enough soccer officials, finding enough volleyball officials willing to handle a regional tournament game, finding enough wrestling officials all of the time to fill all of the regionals and sectionals. You know, we have covered those bases and we've been able to get it done, but certainly within those numbers and within the sports that I've just touched on, there is room. There is room and opportunity if you're interested and willing to give back.
Especially as you mentioned too, with kind of aging population, a lot of these officials as well. Now would probably be a good time for anybody who's just graduated or maybe just graduating college, thinking about either coaching or officiating to get back into the game. There could be quite a few opportunities over the next, several years to a decade as people continue to kind of transition into retirement. I'm sure.
Very, very, very true. It is a good time and a great opportunity. We have a number of initiatives going, whereby if a member school has a Phi Ed class or some other class where they are training new officials, we provide free licensing and rule books to those student officials. I have on countless occasions talked with college students and former athletes and said, you know, if you're looking for a terrific part-time job, get licensed as an official. You know, you can work at your own schedule, you know, what nights you want. Heck, you might even be able to work right on campus in the rec programs and departments. We have regular conversations and meetings with the state university rec directors that govern all of the intramurals and so on every college campus. And they're hungry and clamoring for more officials to work, the rec play there. You know, there are youth leagues in every sport imaginable, from baseball to softball to soccer, lacrosse, though the WIAA doesn't yet sponsor that. But there are opportunities if I were a college student and wanted to find a little part-time work and was a former athlete, it's terrific for being able to make a few dollars and schedule it around your demands.
Fantastic. Looking back the last 5 to 10 years, you say attached here, but just a quick little bite. How have the numbers kind of changed over the last half decade or so?
Probably when you look at our profile from where I can quickly go back, to the late 1960s. And you got to remember that at that time there weren't half of the sport programs or half of the sport offerings that we know today. But 1969 there were 4,000 licensed officials, and then in 1993 we cracked that barrier between 7,000 and 8,000. And for the most part, in the 2000s, with the exception of a couple of years, 12, 13, 14, 2012, 13, 14, we've been at 9,000 or a little bit above that since. We had a couple of years where we're at 8,800, 8,900, right in that area. So there hasn't been a wild fluctuation, a wild swing one direction or another. We've been in that 9,000 range for the past decade.
And I'm sure, like you mentioned too, how we're adding, more sports. That's obviously something you guys, I'm sure, are very excited about, giving more kids in different areas the opportunity to play, different sports at different levels. But even with your numbers kind of holding steady, the more teams you have, the more games you have, there's obviously going to be some little discontinuity, in the availability of people.
No question. And as I tried to elaborate and point out, we have 9,000, and it's a good strong number. But we have 400 or 500 in wrestling, as an example. We have 260 in cross country, and so certainly, as I said a bit ago, depending on the sport and depending on your geography, you might think that the shortage of track starters and track officials and cross country starters is enormous and incredible. And if there are 2 or 3 or 4 licensed track officials in your half of the state, and 50 schools are after them, yeah, that can come to you as a heck of a shortage. So within that number 9,000, it really is important to break it out and break it down a little bit in order to have, I think, a more accurate and complete picture. Certainly sport specific and geography, population density, number of schools, those sorts of things. If you are in that wrong sport in the wrong part of the state, the shortage is real, critical.
Sure. Let's talk about recruitment. We mentioned this, very briefly as well. What are some of the things you guys are doing as WIAA, and is there any collaboration with the other schools, across the state to recruit people? Have you heard how different states are trying to recruit officials as well? Because I'm sure this isn't just a Wisconsin-specific issue. This has to be probably nationwide, I'm sure.
You're right, Chad, in that it is a national conversation because the baby boomers. We are all advancing in age. We are coming to the end of our good joints and flexibility. And that's on a national level. And so, yeah, we have had conversations as executive directors with the National Federation of High School Associations, with Barry Mano and the National Association of Sport Officials. There is certainly awareness and a collaborative spirit and willingness. And so on the national level, there have been, and you may have seen, Channel 5 may have run some of the public service announcements, and whether it's been web streamed or on the radio or on television, and certainly in all of our sport venues at our tournaments, there's always a constant push to plant the seed. Hey, get up off the couch, become an official. We have been a part of, and through our social media, we've been a part of that national effort and campaign. Here in Wisconsin, a couple of years ago, we also initiated and started up an opportunity, an invitation for complimentary, free licensing to military or former military. And it was, we were, as far as I know, probably about the first or one of the first in the country to do that. And it was an interesting story and development on how that came to be. My son just completed a year ago his 20 years in the Army National Guard, and he and I were visiting one day, and I was talking about, hey, he wrestled in high school. You should get licensed as an official. I said, oh yeah, what do you, tell me about it. And so we talked about it, and I said, and he said to me, Dad, for a lot of my soldiers, that would have been just what they needed, for the end of the month, the grocery money, the child care money. And, and it was in that conversation with him that it hit me, and you read so much about military coming back and needing that purpose, needing that camaraderie, needing those challenges. And so it was with that our military initiative, if you're current or former military and you want to officiate football or basketball or wrestling or volleyball, we're going to get you licensed for a couple of years for free, no charge, complimentary rule books. And it has been popular with those who have taken advantage of it. As I mentioned also, we have a number, about 20 of our member high schools right now are teaching a class in officiating, and so we got young students coming along. We work with our coaches organizations and athletics directors to always remind them, seniors, before, at that senior banquet or before you cut them loose for the year, hey, Rebecca and Robert, we really could use you. The sport has been so much a part of your life to this point. You ought to think about getting licensed as an official. You'd be good at it. And then, as I said, our recruiting tables at most of our state championships, the presence at job fairs and those sorts of things. And so we do work hard at it. I think if anyone is really interested into the hearts and minds and the whys and reasons behind officiating and why people leave the profession, if you go to naso.org, you'll find that national survey that the folks at Referee Magazine, National Association of Sport Officials, conducted, and it's good. It's good research. It's current research. You can find the number 1, the number 2, the number 9 reason that people get out of officiating. Terrific body of research and data to draw upon.
Sure. Let's go back to talking about some of those school districts offering these classes. How long has this been going on? Do you know any specific numbers? How many kids are taking advantage of this, and what sports are being offered in these classes?
Some of those details, Chad, I don't. I know that we have 20 of them right now, and I'm not positive. I know that there are at least a handful of these schools who have been offering these sorts of things, I would say, going on a couple of decades now. I'm aware of some of them, who this has been a part of their advanced curriculum in Phi Ed, most commonly. It used to be that many of the state universities would have an officiating class on campus so that the students there could do it. At UW-Whitewater, I was made aware of a young guy who at UW-Whitewater was making a business out of it. He was recruiting officials and subcontracting. He was acting as the contractor and getting them all contests and filling games in and around, not only on campus, but in and around the local communities or the communities adjacent to Whitewater. I think that right now, as I said, we have about 20 member schools who are doing and offering these opportunities to high school students. I would speculate that the majority of them are relatively recent, the past 5 or maybe 10 years. But there are a handful of them that have been going on a long time. I'm not positive what exactly they are providing instruction in, and or if they're running it all year round, if there are a couple of different choices and options available to the kids throughout the course of the school year. I'm not positive of that.
Good idea. And do you kind of encourage other districts to maybe jump on board with something like this?
Absolutely, and all the time. It's not uncommon for us when we are, excuse me, you can edit this.
No.
It's not at all uncommon as we travel around our membership to our fall area meetings, or over the years I can remember at our annual meeting, or when we are present at the athletic director's workshop. One of our members, an athletics director, will get up and say, what's the WIAA going to do about the shortage of officials? Or what's the WIAA going to do about some other topic or issue of, concerning at the moment? And I very quickly try to remind them, the WIAA is all of us. I'm your hired help, but the 514 schools and communities across this state, they are the real and the actual WIAA. We are a member-formed, member-directed organization. If on a statewide basis, 500 and some different schools and communities are relying on the half dozen of us to solve and fix their officials shortage, or any problem or shortage that they might be experiencing, we might not be successful. I can promise you that those of us that work here take it, seriously. We take it to heart. We do all that we can. At the end of the day, it's not the 5 or 6 of us who are giving that official their first crack at a varsity contest in the holiday tournament. It's not the 5 or 6 of us who are giving away all of our freshman or JV games to the same 2 or 3 officials because it's convenient for me. And so I try to draw upon a few different examples of, if the WIAA is going to solve and meet this need, then it will require the entire WIAA, all 514 members, their coaches, their administrators, their athletics directors, to recruit and retain and protect contest officials when they are fortunate enough to have them as their helpers to run these events. The 5 or 6 of us here will do everything that we can possibly do, but I will flat out promise you that we are not able to do it alone.
I'm not involved with officiating right now. Try to convince me why I should start officiating high school sports.
Do you like sports? Did you love sport? Was there someone, was there a coach or a group of friends that were a part of, that growing up experience that remains very, very, fond to you and meaningful to you? There are times when all of us as athletes, I'm sure male, female, young and old, that we reflect on those things which have been formative, what we have learned about and learned through our involvement with athletics and our teammates and our good coaches, if we were fortunate to have folks who saw the bigger picture beyond just the winning, and they were kid-centered and kid-interested. And if you cherish those times, and if you are a believer in giving back, paying forward, whatever cliche you might want to ascribe to it. For those who find their niche in sport officiating, I think it is likely akin to many other vocations, or certainly an avocation, that which compel us to be a part of and to contribute for whatever those very personal reasons might be, that oftentimes may defy a simple explanation as to why. The people that I have encountered over 20 years who have been officiating for 20, 30, 40, 50 years have had an indescribable affection, not only for the experiences. If you like to problem solve, if you think you're a good people's manager, if you want to hone your skills on problem solving, if you want to enhance your resume for your other job, sport officiating can provide all of those things. That connection to the deep loves of our youth, the connection with men and women who are as dedicated to giving back, to honing and crafting their experience, being a part of and being around the game, and certainly no small part of. Some people enjoy that experience of directing and overseeing and coordinating. So it may not be right for everybody, no doubt about it, but it might be right for you and could fill some of those little nooks and crannies of as much time as you're willing to give to it, and be a very, very special, for those who have endured for decades, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of it. From what I have gathered, they can't imagine their lives having been near as complete had they not been a sport official, a high school sport official.